What is your best paranormal experience story? Redditor 91. When I was about 9 years old, my brothers and I were playing ball inside the living room of our house one afternoon. The ball rolled into the bedroom and under the bunk beds, so I crawled under the bed to grab it. As I was reaching for the ball, a face simply appeared on the wall in front of me. It was a woman's face, and it glowed, and she had hair flowing all around and her lips moved, but no sound came out. I stared, utterly terrified and transfixed, unable to move until just as suddenly the face disappeared, and then suddenly I could move again, so I scrambled out as fast as I could. I ran out of the bedroom and told my brothers I had seen a ghost. They all laughed at me. It was 3 p.m. in broad daylight. What kind of scaredy cat sees ghosts during the middle of the day? Fast forward 10 years. My older brother and I are attending the same university. We were hanging out with some friends at a small party, drinking and discussing philosophy, and the subject of the afterlife comes up. I mentioned that the only reason I believe that an afterlife might possibly exist is because I saw a ghost once when I was a kid. I start to tell my ghost story, and suddenly my brother turns as white as a sheet and he stops me. He says, "Wait, that ghost. Was it a woman? Just her face? And was it glowing with long flowing hair and the lips were moving but no sound came out?" I was flabbergasted to hear this. We had never talked about this as kids, except for that one time when they laughed at me. My brother went on to say that he saw that same exact ghost as a kid, but it was in another room and after dark. He thought it had been nothing but a dream until I told my story. We were both stunned to find out that both our stories were essentially identical. I have no reasonable explanation for this. The funny thing is that I am a highly skeptical person by nature, and I smirk and doubt when other people tell ghost stories. I still don't know what to think of my own experience. Was it real, or two people somehow sharing an elaborate false memory? It's just fucking weird and makes zero logical sense. Redditor 92. Small paranormal experience. My older brother was obsessed with ghosts and the paranormal growing up. He also enjoyed scaring the shit out of me. When I was in middle school, he bought this doll from this website that supposedly had souls trapped in them. The one he got supposedly had a younger girl trapped in the doll. Just looking at the thing would scare me to death. He would chase me around with it and just laugh while I was screaming and crying. Well, a few nights after he got it, I was in my room doing homework at my desk. I felt a pinch on my leg, and looked down and saw a visible small bruise right where I felt the pinch. I was confused because no one was in there with me. I didn't really think anything of it. Later that night, my brother and I were in the living room watching TV. Mind you, I didn't say anything about me getting pinched or anything. He ends up telling me that he was in his room playing video games and felt a pinch on his leg. He laughed and said, "I think it's the doll trying to scare me." I instantly felt sick and told him that the same thing happened to me. He had the same small bruise on his leg in the same area where I had one. I slept with the lights on for weeks after that. I'm 24 now, and still think about it from time to time. Could have been a bug, but our house is clean. It's not like we have insects crawling everywhere. Also, my brother kept the doll. Nothing paranormal has happened since that one small experience. Was it that doll? Ike. But it's pretty damn creepy, and too weird to be a coincidence. Redditor 93. The best and only paranormal experience I've ever had was about 3 months ago. I had a couple of friends over, and at about 11:30 my friend Dylan said, "Hey, I didn't say anything earlier because I didn't want you guys to freak out, but I swear I saw someone looking at me from the bottom of the stairs." We were home alone, me and Cameron thought he was just dicking around with us and laughed it off. About an hour later we heard thumps from upstairs, and a few moments later a clothes hanger in my closet started swinging out of nowhere. Just last week I asked Dylan if he was just trying to spook us, and he said no, so I asked him to describe the person he saw, and when he did, he described my late grandfather to a T. Dylan has never seen a picture of my grandpa and has never really heard about him. Spooked me a bit, but my grandpa always used to play jokes on people, so maybe he was trying to prank us even after death. Redditor 94. I was 19, got home from work pretty late and decided to watch what was left of this huge football game on TV downstairs. I yelled at the TV because the ref gave out a penalty, and my sister from upstairs calls down, "Are you home?" Now, naturally, I don't like stupid questions, so my first instinct was to turn around, look up the stairs from the couch, and yell no shit since I was already heated and I'd been home for an hour almost. However, I decided to be a good little brother and just turn back around and ignore her. After a few minutes, I remembered my parents were at a cookout on the other side of town and called my mom's phone to make sure they brought me some leftover food. So as the call connects, I get ready to talk and I hear my sister is the one who picks up the phone. I was home alone. Has been since I had gotten back from work. I've never felt that type of dread in my life. I put the call on speaker, muted the TV, kicked the recliner out and made my way to the stairs only to realize that every single light was off upstairs as were any TVs. It was pitch black. When I had turned to the stairs to yell back at my sister, I swore I had seen the lamps in the hall and her room lights on. I still think about it often. Something called out to me and I almost replied. Redditor 95, I was on a school trip to Port Arthur, Tasmania. Staff were showing a dozen or so of us a sensory deprivation chamber. It was both dark and soundproof, and used as punishment for prisoners. With a dozen of us in there, it was basically full. However, the group couldn't stay silent enough to experience the chamber. That's when me and two others took a moment to experience it. That's when I heard deep breathing, that I doubt came from any of us. Do you hear that? I asked, to which another said the heavy breathing. Mind you, I hadn't told them what I heard, and there was nobody standing outside either. So I have no clue where it came from. Redditor 96, from about ages 5-10, I used to get incredibly scared of going to the bathroom at night. My parents' bedroom door was at the end of a very long hallway, and it was just really dark and I couldn't really see. Every time I went to the bathroom, I'd see this really tall, shadowed figure standing directly in front of my parents' bedroom door. His head was always tilted down. It looked like his forehead was resting against the door. I saw it every single night. I would sprint to the bathroom and back to my room, and it pissed my sister off so much. My parents asked why I kept doing it, so I told them about the man at the end of the hallway. They just brushed it off since I was just a kid. And, eventually, I stopped seeing him. Fast forward a few years. I was probably around 15 at the time. My parents went to see a medium. It was something my mom liked doing. She had a brother who died when I was just about 5 years old. The medium picked up on the spirit of my uncle, my mom's brother, and she apparently asked my mom this. Why was your son so afraid of the man at the end of your hallway? When my mom told me that, I was spooked. The medium said that it was my uncle watching over my mom in her room, which is why his forehead was always against the door and why he never turned around to look at me. Definitely a pleasant realization, I'd say. Redditor 97, there was an entity that followed my friend around our accommodation campus in uni. Only on the older side of the campus that was most used. We couldn't walk around at night by ourselves without it following us, and it felt like it wanted to hurt us. My friend went to take her rubbish out from her room, and just as she opened the door, a crow flew past and scared the bejesus out of her, giving her such a deep feeling of dread. One thing that's interesting is that crows are the totem animal of her tribe. She shut and locked the door and didn't leave until morning. One night after studying together in a common room, we went our separate ways for the night, and I had a bit of a trek as I had just moved to the renovated side of the campus, and it stalked me all the way to the boundary of the car park. I never felt it over on the other side of the parking lot ever. She soon transferred near me about a year before I left, and neither of us ever felt it again. Redditor 98. Now, I want to make it clear. I don't actually believe in ghosts, never have, I still don't. I always believe in irrational explanations. That being said, I have had some weird experiences in an old house my father owned. I lived in the second floor, a friend of mine lived in the first floor. When I came home after being gone all day, my friend in the first floor would ask me if I just got home. I would reply yes, and he said he could hear somebody walking upstairs just now. I would walk upstairs, unlock the door, and there was nobody there. This would happen several times. I lived there alone for a year or two. Strange things would happen, such as doors opening by themselves even though they were in locked position. Sometimes I would wake up with a feeling somebody was there next to my bed, the presence of somebody. It was just weird. One time I was sitting in the living room in front of my computer as usual with a headset on and I could feel somebody tapping my shoulder. I turned around and there was nobody there. Shivers went down my spine. After moving away from there, I have never ever experienced anything like that again. Maybe it was just because the house was old and poorly isolated. Who knows, but that was a weird time. Redditor 99. This happened whilst we were on holidays in Wales. My bedroom was on the opposite side of the house than everyone else's. Intact, there was almost no reason to go anywhere near my bedroom unless you wanted to talk to me. To get to my bedroom you had to open an extremely loud door, walk up a flight of loud stairs, walk down a hallway and open my door. The door handle on my door was quite broken. You had to turn it much more for it to actually open. So it was around 11 p.m. and I was getting ready for bed. Everyone else had gone to bed and there was no noise at all. I started to get changed into my PJs. I stripped down and started to put on my trousers. The downstairs door creaked open and then slammed closed. Panicked, I started to get changed faster. I kept stumbling and falling over, not actually getting anything done. Quiet footsteps crawled up the stairs, missing all of the creaks that was almost impossible to miss. I had just gotten my trousers on when I heard it start to walk to the door. I hid my body under some blankets and watched as I saw the door handle slowly turn. Still in panic, I screamed out no so that they wouldn't open the door. After that, it was silent. I chucked my clothes on and opened the door. I expected to see my sister or something, but no. Just an empty hallway. I've gone through this over and over in my head and I can't come up with any reason why apart from the supernatural. Redditor 100. This happened when I was around 10-11 years old after my grandfather died. My grandfather had came to live with me and my family when it became clear he had dementia after a stroke he had a year prior. He just lost his wife, my grandmother, 2 years prior. My grandfather had a rough end of the road living in the same house to witness it, and we tried our best to never make him feel unwelcome or a bother. If we got frustrated, we learned to laugh with him and take our time with what he needed. After 3 years he finally passed away while his daughter, my aunt, and her children came to stay with him while and my family went to North Carolina for a weekend. Side note, my mother was devastated she wasn't there for him when he passed after trying so hard to do everything she could for him and way much more than my aunt and uncle did in his final years. But he died inside our house. On our sofa. In our living room. About 3 days after his passing we were all sitting for dinner and talking about how we missed watching the basement light turning on at dinner time. We made him a mother-in-law suite in our basement, so that's where he'd always pop up at dinner time, always early too. The next thing we knew the light bulb exploded, not like zap out but loud and shattering. We all laughed and thought it was him. Even after it was replaced, the light to the basement would flicker and some other basement lights would flicker, and also sometimes you'd randomly find fruit cake in a random part of the house. He loved fruit cake, and this could be from him having dementia and putting it in random places and forgetting, and this was all oddly comforting, like Grandpa was still with us in spirit. I wonder how the people that bought our house is faring with those flickering basement lights and if they are finding fruit cake. Sours if anything is misspelled. I don't have time to proofread at 5 a.m, embarrassed smiley face. Redditor 101, when I was a teen, maybe 15-16 years, I had trouble sleeping. I would wake up and feel like someone is watching me. It was always the same corner of my room. I would just stare at it. I was sure that I am looking at someone's eyes. Sometimes, I wouldn't sleep all night, just laying there, not moving, cause if I move something bad will happen. Sometimes, I would drift off and fell asleep. I shared a room with my brother and he liked sleeping in full darkness. It took me weeks to convince him to leave windows slightly open so that some light can enter our bedroom. I was so happy that evening cause I thought I will finally be free of the figure. Nope. I woke up that night and felt it sitting on the bottom of my bed, where the light can't reach. I was terrified. For weeks I couldn't sleep at my own bed. Only sleep I would get is when I went to my grandma and my friends for sleepovers. Then, one day, the figure was gone. Sometimes I wake up at night and still can feel like someone watches me, but never again did it torment me for weeks and months like that. And I still don't know, was it a product of my anxiety, imagination, or something else? Redditor 102, I was asleep and I can swear that my father was waking me up telling me to check if I got the job I applied for. It was 4 months of waiting for the application that I even lost hope. And he kept persistently annoying me. I woke up, found out that Dad is at work. Minutes later I get an email that I was accepted. Redditor 103, visited a friend who lived in an old house with a main staircase that would creak and pop terribly. It sounded like it was going to cave in. He had said the attic light would turn itself on, and he'd have to go up there and turn it off, and it was creepy. The house had this ornate wooden entry room, with a carved wood bench coat rack thing. All the woodwork was incredible. I'm going to guess early 1900s. He said he was exhausted this particular day because he didn't sleep well. He woke up in the middle of the night and saw a woman and a child standing in his bedroom. It scared him, so he stood up out of bed. As he stood there, the boy ran at him and hugged his leg, but it freaked him out because the boy felt ice cold as he grabbed his leg. The woman then said, "Sorry, he thinks you're his father." And suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the woman and child are gone. He's just standing all alone in his bedroom in the middle of the night. So he's like, WTF just happened? A few seconds later, he hears someone walking slowly down the rickety loud old staircase. He heard every single step taken, slowly, since it was so loud. He turned on all his lights and didn't sleep the rest of the night. He eventually moved out since his fiancée didn't want to live there, and the house has been torn down for some time. Redditor 104, it's not much knit. When I was a kid I had a weird experience. I was throwing a baseball at our love seat. Directly behind said love seat was the family glass curio cabinet. Eventually I missed the love seat and the baseball was head straight at the curio cabinet, then the ball kiss stopped mid-air and floated there. I went to look at it and as soon as I got close the ball dropped to the floor. It was pretty crazy but ultimately a one-tone thing for me personally. Many other weird things happened to family members on that house. Redditor 105, not me but my mom. She grew up in a small village in India. She told me one day her and my aunt were walking back home from school and my mom stopped along the way to tie her shoe. My aunt told her to catch up with her. Later in the day, my aunt began to feel ill and took a nap. When she woke up she had a totally different identity personality and kept speaking about her family which didn't match with our family. My grandparents called a local black magic specialist who listened to my aunt and reported back that a spirit had possessed her and all the things she's saying matches to a mother who had died on the same pathway years ago. This mother had just lost her child and committed suicide along the same path due to depression. Apparently when my aunt told my mom to catch up come with her that invited the spirit to hitch a ride using her body. In Indian spirit superstition, and I'm guessing most other cultures as well, whenever someone dies unnaturally and emotionally, the spirit stays where it left the body until it is at peace. I have a hard time believing it but as an adult, I don't know why my mom would make that story up. Redditor 106, I know I'm late to the game, but I really wanted to share mine. When I was about 10 or 11 years old, I developed this intense dread that someone was squatting in my family's detached garage. I hated being left home alone because I had this constant feeling that someone was watching me. It got so bad that I couldn't sleep at night. When I mentioned it to my mom, she just kind of stared at me in a manner that I assumed meant, "Are you even listening to yourself?" I dropped the subject and continued to suffer in silence. One evening, it was just my mom and I, so we decided to rent a movie. The tape wasn't rewound and our VCR's rewinding mechanism was broken, so my mom sent me to the garage to rewind the tape using our old VCR. While I was waiting for it to finish, a wave of terror washed over me. Heavy footsteps approached the door, and I heard the loud clatter of someone stepping on the loose, metal threshold plate. Someone was breathing heavily in large panting breaths just outside the slightly ajar door. I held my own breath in case it was just my own panic attack-induced breathing I was hearing, but no, the heavy panting continued. My heart thundering in my chest, I gripped a screwdriver in my sweaty hands and quietly approached the door. I flung it open. Nothing. I circled the garage. Nothing. I peeked over the fences on either side of my house. Still nothing. I convinced myself that I was losing my mind and finished rewinding the tape. Once I had made my way back into the house, I broke into tears and told my mom that there was something wrong with me. I explained what had just happened, and my mom went still. She clearly knew something, but when I pressed her to tell me, she said she didn't want to scare me. Eventually, she caved and told me that my 6-year-old brother had been acting strange lately. He had been sleeping in my parents' bed ever since my dad started spending weeknights at the house he was flipping in another town. Apparently, my brother had been refusing to go into their room by himself at night, claiming he was too scared. He would tell my mom that he was afraid of the skinny man standing by the bed. She asked him to draw a picture of the man. He drew a tall, thin man who was missing half his face. I found out later that the house my dad had been flipping was the former house of a crazy drug addict. The house was trashed, the backyard was full of garbage. As he cleared all of the crap out, he found syringes and crack pipes and I'm sure other weird shit. While fixing the wiring in the house, he came across hidden cameras installed in the walls. Apparently the neighbors had all sorts of fucked up stories about the guy and the people who would come and go from the house. I don't remember specifics. My mom believed that my dad brought home with him whatever negative energy lingered in the house. Or a demon. Redditor 107, best? I wonder what people would consider best, but I'll use this one. I'm a janitor in a building about 80 years old, in an area settled in the 1700s. I was cleaning a public bathroom. I leaned near a paper towel dispenser to clean a sink, and it went off, spitting out a towel. To amuse myself, I told the dispenser, "Thank you." It promptly spit out another. And the dispenser behind me spit out one. And the dispenser in the neighboring bathroom spit out one. I could hear it happen since the doors were propped open. There were only a couple of people in the building, and no one else on my floor. You can't sneak onto the floor because you have to go through very old, heavy, noisy metal fire doors. I said, "Okay, that's enough." A toilet flushed, as if to say, "Okay." No more paper towels dispensed. I think the ghost was trying to be helpful. Redditor 108, one time at scout camp me and 3 other people were sleeping in a tent in a long creepy hall with no windows. There wasn't enough beds. Our tent was in the opposite back left corner from the door. Like right up against the corner. We stayed up and chatted for a good part of the night and then decided to try and sleep. As we were trying to sleep though, we heard someone else in the room breathing really heavily. The weird thing was though it was coming from in the corner right behind our tent. All 4 of us could hear them just standing there breathing right behind our heads, half expecting them to make an appearance. It was terrifying. I couldn't sleep out of the fear of it. I was the closest one to whoever it was there. The thing is though, there was no way anyone could get into that corner without us hearing. The door was very heavy and squeaky and slammed when it shut. The hall was very echoey and footsteps were always very loud. Plus the corner was behind the freaking tent. There also wasn't any vent or other explanation for the noise. Redditor 109, the one that I have has to do with a cat. About 11 years ago my childhood cat died. I was crushed because this was my cat who has been with me since I was born. This cat used to care for me like I was a kitten. She would sit and wait for me to get home from school. She would stay with me if I was sick. She would try and keep warm and even try to clean me. I loved this cat and she loved me. She got old and a fall started the downward spiral for her. After she died I was crushed and I missed her. The weeks after I started feeling like she was laying on me like she used to. Doors would open the same way she would open the doors and I would even hear her meows. The feelings have lessened and the door openings have completely stopped, but I think that's because we've moved into a house with the wrong door handles for her. I still miss her but I have moved on. Redditor 110, my wife's father died a couple of years ago. 3 months after he died her cell randomly rang in the middle of the night at 3:30 a.m. from a number from the town she grew up. She picked up but there was a bunch of static and what sounded like a man on the other end trying to say something but could not be understood, but sounded like they were saying "help me." She called back but the line was disconnected. The next day we did some digging, and the phone number had been out of service for 26 years. The last time the number had been operation was at one of the restaurants her father owned, which had closed 26 years prior. Redditor 111, this isn't my story but my dad's. When he was little, he lived in an old house that had a sewing room at the front. Inside the sewing room, there was a vintage sewing machine, think late 1800s model, the type where you still had to pump the foot pedal to get it to work. My dad was going to bed one night after watching a show until the TV station ran out, or however it worked. The TV started playing static as was usual when he noticed the light was on in the sewing room. He went to investigate thinking his mom left it on by accident. Once he got closer, he realized he heard the sound of the sewing machine. It was a rhythmic creak pop sound. He knew what it sounded like because his mom used it from time to time, but again it wasn't electric. It needed a foot to push the pedal to make it work, and it needed a bit of force to do so. The machine was solid cast iron. The sewing room was empty, save for my dad. The moment he walked into the room, the pedals started going faster and faster until my dad got too freaked out and ran crying upstairs. He was 9-ish to just go to bed and hope it wasn't real. The next morning he asked his mom if she noticed anything weird about the sewing room, but she hadn't. For the next few years while they still lived there, and only on the nights my dad was by himself, every so often the sewing machine would start. Nothing beyond it speeding up really fast would happen, but it freaked my dad out, so he refused to go through the room for a while. That's how the story goes according to my dad. It freaks me out thinking about it. I can't imagine actually seeing and hearing it. Redditor 112. My story is pretty wholesome. This was about a week after my grandfather passed away. I've loved him very much, but in the later years I couldn't spend much time with him. I was up late at night just feeling really down in the kitchen. Then when I looked over to my right, I saw him just sitting there next to me with a warm but slightly sad smile. For some reason, I was not surprised by this at all. It was as if this was completely normal, almost expected. He then said, "It's all right. It's not your fault." Then he just vanished without a trace. Only then did it finally dawn on me what just happened. That event helped me cope with it a lot. I still miss him though. Redditor 113. I was a kid of about 5 years. I woke one night to see an old lady sitting on the edge of my bed in her 90s knitting. At first I was afraid, but then a feeling of such peacefulness and safeness descended upon me. I went back to sleep. There were no old ladies in our house. It was an old gabled house. A house some folks would say that will be filled with ghosts. Redditor 114. So I was at scouting camp, sleeping in a tent with a few other people. We saw 2 light blue semi-transparent figures near the goal at the other side of the field. One standing, one laying down. Suddenly the where at the tiny forest across the field. When the shape of a face appeared in the side of the tent, where I was laying, damn, it was the most creepy yet fun night so far. Redditor 115. Necessary, not my story. Some neighbor's apartment I guess had something in it, so they left the apartment. They purchased it so it's their property to move to in another country. They came back once their neighbor sent a video, I think, of plates being smashed in the kitchen and loud screaming can be heard. He was filming from the outside and no one was in because the apartment was locked and no one was seen entering or coming out. In fact, it was silent before that started happening. So one of the neighbors came back to see what was going on. He came to the kitchen and found that almost all the plates were smashed on the floor. Edit, formatting, even I think that it looks jumbled. Redditor 116. At the university I attended I had a few ghostly experiences. For reference, the university was literally built on a large rice plantation dating back to the early 1800s. The president's house was the big house with the columns and Spanish moss and everything. There were 2 cabins dating back to the 1850s and a cemetery for the enslaved still on campus, right near the freshman dorms. There were also rumors that the local serial killer had used the swamps around the school to hide bodies of hitchhikers that he had killed. The school had lots of ghost stories, doors opening and closing by themselves, lights going on and off, noises and shadow people. To the point that lots of students living on campus wouldn't walk around at night because it was so spooky, and on more than one occasion I heard campus cops telling people about it. One night my girlfriend at the time and I were hanging out outside a friend's dorm chain-smoking Camels. The dorm area parking was connected to a road with the swamps and slave cabins on the other side. We watched this weird light bobbing up and down, slowly coming closer, and I figured it was one of the campus cops until it floated behind this tree and didn't come back out. My GF and I both agreed to go for a walk right after, but the whole time it felt like something was following us around campus. There was an area between two of the large campus buildings with a wooded walkway, pretty well lit. At the end of the walkway we both saw a shadow figure standing close to a tree, and as we got closer to it the thing walked behind the tree. Now I was skeptical in the sense I didn't want to be scared by some Ashol or another student, so we both kept walking to see who it was. There was no one behind the tree and there wasn't any way someone could have snuck around it without us seeing. I've got a couple more stories and some of my friends as well. Good times. Redditor 117. Okay, so not to me, but I was there. We had two family friends that were older ladies. Their daughters worked together, but did not like each other, so their mothers never met. They lived in the same community a couple miles apart. I was helping move a couch for old lady 1, who honestly was kind of an Ashol who only thought about herself. She walked into the room and said, "Call the other old lady's daughter. Her mom just walked through my wall and said I should be nicer to people and floated away and I think she just died." Then she described her perfectly and mentioned she was holding a locket on a necklace. She always wore that necklace. I called and found out she just passed. Redditor 118. I only have one, so that would be it. My mother and I were having a conversation in the living room when we heard the toaster pop up. The whole house smelled like warm bread and Mom and I followed the smell into the kitchen. The toaster was unplugged, was sitting on top of the refrigerator and we were alone. Redditor 119. Finally, maybe someone might believe me. November 2019, my husband and I brought a fixer-upper. My husband was getting takeout and I was painting the nursery for my son. I heard a scream from the bathroom. I kept hearing it over and over. Then when Nick came back with food, we heard a little boy giggling. It kept happening for 2 months then in the basement, only at night, you can still hear a little boy giggling. Redditor 120, I've written this one hour before on another thread. It was probably about 9-10 years ago. I was back in my hometown, visiting family on a random weekend. And an old friend and I had run into each other and made plans to meet up later that night. There was a place about 5 minutes from my family's land that was a hangout spot when we were younger. It was literally just a place to park, off a dirt road, out in the sticks, that kind of place. Nobody went down there anymore, but after a night of shooting the shit, we went down to reminisce on old high school college memories. We go to this place and eat a pitch black. You're in the woods near an old schoolhouse foundation in a creek bed that is dry except for like 1 month a year when it rains real bad. So we're just on the tailgate, chatting, laughing, and clear as day, we hear what we can only describe as children giggling. So we get a little creeped, walk over towards the school foundation, and then this super loud bell ringing sound happens right on where the school would have been. We looked at each other, and we're both a little freaked but decide we're just imagining things. So we go back to the truck. And it happened again, but this time you heard what sounded like kids on a playground. It was shrieking and screaming. It was absolutely the creepiest feeling. My skin was crawling. So we left. Since then people have reported the same thing in the area and some have even said they can see the forms of kids playing near the schoolhouse. I'd never heard it until after I went. But I have never gone back after dark. TLDR, hung out in the woods by an old schoolhouse foundation and heard kids screaming, laughing, playing, and even the school bell. Redditor 121, I was dreaming like half awake and half asleep and could see the room with my eyes closed, and above me was a snowman looking ghost and elf sprit sucking the angry off my body. Like feeding on my soul and making me feel afraid. So I try really hard to wake up and try and scare the ghost and am barely able to, but I slowly wake and go rawr. At the where the ghosts were in the room. I scared the ghost BC, he scared me. Redditor 122. Here's a repost of an experience I shared on our paranormal. My grandfather loved my grandmother a lot. He would constantly tell her she was beautiful and would always do embarrassing things to make her laugh. Unfortunately, she died a few months after being diagnosed with cancer. This affected him a lot, but as time went on he came to terms with it. My grandfather lived on for another 18 years. In his final years he developed really bad Alzheimer's that led him to forget that his wife had passed away and would often call for her or ask us where she went. We'd explained to him that she had passed away, but it always made him distressed and upset, so we decided to tell him she'll be back soon every time he asked where she was. A month or so before my grandfather passed away, I was at his house with my mother and we were all sitting in the living room. My grandfather, who was seated on his chair, all of a sudden starts frantically asking us where my grandmother was. We calmly explained to him that she'll be back soon and she was just out doing some chores. Unlike most times, he was being persistent on wanting to see her. We explained to him again that she'll be back soon, but he kept getting more persistent. He started to frantically call for her. He screamed her name as loud as he could over and over again until out of nowhere every single door and window in the room flung open all at once. Now we could say that it was just wind, but all the doors and windows in the house had secure locks and would stay locked at all times, since my grandfather would wander off or forget to lock his doors. All the doors and windows burst open, and at that same second my grandfather, who was facing the front door, says, "What took you so long? I've been waiting for you," with a smile. My mother and I didn't see the person my grandfather talked to, but I'm sure that he saw his wife. Redditor 123, when I was 19 my grandfather was dying of cancer. I woke up in the middle of the night to see him standing beside me. He looked like his old healthy self, not the emaciated version we were getting used to seeing. He told me that he had just stopped by to tell me that he loved me and he'd see me again. I had a profound feeling of peace and went back to sleep. I awoke to my phone ringing. It was my mother. "Grandpa died, didn't he?" I said without giving her a chance to speak. "Yes," she answered. I told her about his visit and she said that she wasn't surprised that he stopped by to say goodbye to me since I couldn't be there in his last days. Redditor 124. In the summer one year, 12-year-old me and two of my friends decided to go out and explore the woods out behind my old house. Time felt extremely fast because before we knew it, it was night. We were lost and terrified. We kept trying to find a way out, but the forest felt infinite. We heard a gunshot and ran. I got split up from my friends and couldn't find them. At this point I couldn't handle it, so I sat by a tree and waited for so long until I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around expecting to see them, but I saw a little girl. I was terrified and I asked, "Can you help me?" Then she let out a scream that still scares me to this day, and in the most demonic voice I've ever heard she said, "No. You'll stay." Then my friends came to me and said they heard me scream. I still don't know WTF that was, but we were finally able to find a way back to my house. I didn't leave the house for another couple weeks. Redditor 125, my dad told us a story of when he was younger. He was going up the stairs in his house and went to put his hand on the banister on the way up, only he put his hand on someone else's hand that seemed to already be there. Freaked me out when he told us. Redditor 126, I posted this twice already, but here it is anyways. For me, I think it was back in 2012, hope it's the correct year, where the family and I traveled to the Philippines. We stayed somewhere in a rented apartment in some condominium complex with all the amenities popular at the time: pool, clubhouse, etc. My two brothers and I shared the same room, with them taking the bunk bed and me on the floor. One of the nights while we slept, I was on my back. Something in the room woke me, and as I opened my eyes I saw a woman, or least felt like it, draped in an entire white sheet. The sheet didn't fall down to my face, but as if she was wearing it. I freaked and thought to myself that FCK, if I'm going to die, close my eyes. I did, and went back to sleep. I awoke the next day, little bit shaken by what I saw, and tried not to think of it much and just write it off as some bad dream. The rest of the morning was spent just killing time at the pool with family while my mom stays back to clean up the apartment and prep for lunch. When we returned, she mentioned casually that while she was sweeping the floors alone in the living room, she saw a white sheeted figure move somewhere at the corner of her eye. Despite reaffirming what I saw the previous night, we just never spoke about it anymore and continued to enjoy the holidays in that place without a care. Redditor 127, the day I found my mother dead, my father called and told me to tell her spirit it was okay to move on. I was so shook by the death that I did say that to her in my own way when I was off the phone with my dad. It was like a fog was lifted a little, which felt strange. But, that death did duck me up bad, but I do remember the heaviness in the house until I told her it was okay to leave. Her death is part of why I have mental issues and things like nightmares a lot of nights. Redditor 128, that was the last day I slept with my bedroom door open. My mother used to open the balcony in the middle of the night if she needed air, so I was used to seeing her in front of my door, waiting for the air to come in. From the angle I was lying in my bed, only thing you could see was the balcony door, so I woke up and saw my mother standing by the door, staring at me. I felt uncomfortable, so I said, "Mom?" No response. I thought she didn't hear me well, so I repeated, "Mom?" No response again. I understood that what I am seeing is a human looking like black shadow. I was scared to death, so I covered myself with blanket and started yelling gibberish. I was 6 at the time, so I would wake up my parents and they would come. After about 2 minutes of my gibberish, Dad came and asked me, "What am I doing?" I removed the blanket and there was nobody there. I was scared shitless. I saw something in the dark 3 times, had sleep paralysis 3 times that I recall, and predicted 1 death. I am still afraid of the dark, even though I am soon to be 24. I know that can all be logically explained, but I hate fucking dark. Redditor 129, I was in eastern Russia. It was after midnight and I had gone down into the courtyard between apartment towers to do some pull-ups on the exercise equipment there. I was a few sets into my workout when I saw an older gentleman walking very slowly down into the courtyard. He took very short, shuffling steps, and it took him several minutes to get from the edge of the courtyard to get near to where I was doing my workout. He stopped about 40 feet from me and looked at me, nodding his head slightly. I continued with my workout and did a quick set of 20 pull-ups. When I turned around to look at where he was standing, he was nowhere in sight. The courtyard extended a few hundred feet in every direction. There's simply no way he could have covered the distance to be out of sight in that time, given his slow laboring pace that I saw as he walked in. Redditor 130, at my grandmother's house, I've seen a lot of weird and creepy shit, and I haven't ever been the only one. As a kid growing up in that house, it was extremely weird to see things move around where they shouldn't be, or seeing things that shouldn't be possible. Whenever she was younger, she played into the mythical and mysterious, and was super interested in the unnatural and paranormal. She had a Ouija board which she kept in the closet of the guest bedroom, the room I stayed in when I went to go visit. It would make strange noises during the night, which was odd because that room used to be used for a recording studio and the walls were soundproof, so hearing noises that we couldn't hear during the day was terrifying. One day while running around being a child, I saw what looked like my grandma standing in the hallway to my room, but it didn't quite look like her. I didn't know what, but something was off. I saw her go into Grandpa's study where he works on putting together his firearms. I went in to go talk to her, but she wasn't there. The room only had 1 entrance and 1 exit, no closet except the gun safe he had in the corner. Another time, at night I went to go get a glass of water and I set it down on the table in front of me and I watched it slowly slide across the table. My mom had also seen this kind of thing happen to her before, so we were both fairly unsettled by it happening twice. There are many more stories I could tell about that house, but I will spare some time so you guys can read other comments.